Okay, we are at 6:30, and Nick, can I pull this closer? Thanks. That way I don't feel like I have to shout. Maybe I don't, but we're at 6:30, and let's go ahead and get the meeting underway. And I just want to say on recording, patience here. We have 3 board members calling in tonight for various reasons, so they're on, and several people on the call, and more people in-house than we've had in a little while, so it's good to see some faces again. I have confirmation that Amy, and Dennis are on the line. Yes. Sarah, have you gotten any visitors that are on there?
There are
identified yet?
But I have not got them all identified yet.
Okay. Do you want to speak up and ask, like, give the last 3 digits of a phone number or 4 digits and ask for identification?
Yes. Does that work? Is that better? Okay. The phone number ending in 15. Can you identify?
Dawn Span.
I'm sorry?
Dawn Span.
How was it?
The phone number ending in 29.
Nurse Lacey.
And the phone number ending in 39. Phone number ending in 39. Okay, we'll come back to you. Phone number ending in 42. I think you're muted. Okay.
Lindsay Tasker.
There you go.
Okay, phone number ending in 48.
Raina May.
Okay, phone number ending in 56.
Brad Allwell.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Brad Allwell.
Brad Allwell.
Brad, okay. And then, let's see, is that all of them? Nope. Phone number ending in 60.
Andrea Graff.
And we had one more that we didn't get a response. The phone number ending in 39.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks, everybody, for being on the call. We have more people than normal on our call, so we'll just ask that if you're on the call with us for the meeting, will you please mute your phone so that we don't get that feedback and we can be able to proceed. And the last request is if your phone number ends in 39, can you just give us identification because we're required to list attendees and visitors to our meetings.
That might be my phone number.
Oh, it is. But
Yeah.
There you go.
we just got a
Didn't
new
come up.
area code 618 and it ends in a 38.
It's an area code 217 and ends in 39.
No, that one was Dennis. He just identified himself, but I saw a new one come on the call right after Christy started talking, and it was an area code 618 ending in a 38. If they haven't hung up, we need them to identify themselves. Yeah, they're still on.
Okay. So if you have a 618 ending in 38, please state your name.
Hello, this is Leah Varvel. I'm a parent.
Thank you, Leah. Sorry for the hassle, everybody. We just have to get those names down.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we are ready.
I'm not sure how to mute, so I don't know how to mute. I just have a key. I don't know what the next thing is to mute.
Dennis,
Yes.
you're all right. You don't need to mute.
Okay, I can't. I don't know how to do it.
I'll ask our 3 board members who are on the call to not mute. All right, thanks.
How do you mute? I can't get mine muted either.
*6. *6.
*6. If that's an iPhone, it's a *6.
*6.
That was the way we unmuted.
Okay. Now we're ready to begin. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Sarah, will you call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Carley.
Here.
Dr. Magulius.
Here.
Mr. Goebel.
Here.
Mr. Gattoni.
Here.
Mr. File.
Here.
Mrs. Reynolds.
Here.
Mrs. Johnson.
Here. Okay, and are there any visitors that wish to be addressed? I heard one yes on the call. Did I? I don't hear anyone now.
In person, so let's
Okay.
start there.
We do have one in person, so we're going to bring our in-person visitor up. Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Ashley Dunn. I am a parent of a girl that goes to RIS. Does he need you? Sorry, I could see that he needs you. Thank you. I just want to first thank you all for doing and volunteering during this unprecedented time. I know it's a hard job during a normal school year, so I can only imagine what you're going through now. But I feel like as a parent and a fellow educator, I had to voice my concerns about the proposal about going back 4 days a week with more students in the classroom. My first concern is the increased number of students that will be quarantined each week. I just looked at the school website, and it showed that on January 15th that week, that there was one student that was quarantined at the junior high school, or tested positive from the junior high school, and it caused 26 students to be quarantined. Again, at RIS, there was one student with a positive case, and it caused 17 students to be quarantined. This was with our students not having as many students in classes, and so I could only guesstimate that with more kids in class closer together, that you're going to see the number of students quarantined go up exponentially. And I feel like that is going to be a huge disservice to our students and our staff. In addition, I have a question, and I haven't heard the details on our plan, so I was hoping that this would happen afterwards. I might have some more information. But are we following the 6 feet protocol that's recommended by the Illinois Department of Public Health if we go back to 4 days a week with more students in the classroom? And if not, why not? And who makes that decision? Because ultimately, you're making it a health decision for my child if you're saying that she's going to be 3 feet from other students multiple times throughout her school day. I don't feel like that is a very responsible thing for us to do, to go against the Illinois Department of Public Health guidelines. As you can see, you all are standing more than 6 feet apart. We are not having 20 plus people in a room that's smaller than most of our classrooms. If we are holding meetings like this in a larger setting, why are we expecting our students and our teachers every day to be in a classroom that's smaller, to be less than 6 feet apart, if that's not what's being recommended by our health care professionals? In conclusion, I, like most of all of you, want my daughter back in school full time. I'll be completely honest, I'm over this. I don't want it to happen anymore. However, I feel like that we need to make sure that this step forward is not done in haste. If we do go back 4 days a week with all students that wish to go in person, we're looking at increasing the number of students and staff who will be quarantined each week. This frequent change in attendance will ultimately be a bigger disruption to the learning process, and it'll be more work on the teacher side of things. I can tell you that myself, working for a different school district, that it is so hard to regulate those students coming in and out every week. And those students hate it. Those students lose assignments. Those students get behind. Versus if we stayed at the plan that we're at now, students are, knock on wood, my daughter has not had to be quarantined because we are maintaining that 6 feet distance. If you go to the part where she's 3 feet apart, that's not going to happen. She's going to be quarantined sometime soon. So I just thank you all for listening. Again, I know your job is super hard, but I would like you to kind of think about that as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have?
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone on the line? Any visitors that want to address the board? Okay. I'm going to move ahead to approval of the consent agenda, and I need a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Goebel.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Carley. Call the roll, please, Sarah.
Mr. Yatoni,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Carley,
Yes.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Dr. Magulius,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds.
Yes.
Okay, financial reports. Mr. McDermott?
Okay, on the investment report, interest rates remain unchanged over last month, as well as interest income will follow that trend and be much less than it was last year. At the end of last year, compared to the end of 2020, interest rates were down over 100 basis points. So that is the cause for our drop in interest income this year. Overall balances for the month of December were down a little over $1.7 million. Most of that was due to a bond payment of $1.36 million. And going into next month, we'll have three of our bonds have payments totaling a little over $697,000. So those balances will drop at least by that much over next month. And that is it on the investment report, unless there are any questions.
Speaking of our bonds, I was wondering, you may not know the answer to this, but if we have any bonds maturing this year to refinance during these historically low interest rates?
Well, overall, our rates are pretty low on our bonds right now, but when we restructured those a couple of years ago, a couple of those maturities are taken out because one of the bond issues to get the rate we got back then is non-callable, but that bond ends fairly soon. I think we have one bond issue that will be paid in full after next school year.
Oh, okay.
So we'll be down to 3 bonds total.
Okay.
But the way that was structured, the payments will gradually go up to keep that same tax rate on the bonds.
And it'll pay off anyway, so wouldn't want to refinance anyway. So, okay.
It would probably be cost prohibitive just based upon the difference in interest rates that we have now compared to what we can get, as well as the issuance costs.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll need a motion to approve the bills, payroll, and treasurer's report as presented.
So moved.
So moved. Mr. Yatoni, I heard so moved. Is the second?
From me, Mrs. Johnson.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any questions on the bills? Okay, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Carley,
Yes.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Dr. Magulius,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
and Mr. Yatoni.
Yes.
Okay, we have administrator reports and director reports included in your board packet. Are there any questions from our board members for our, what? Did I miss something?
Just want to go over the
I'm sorry, year-to-date fund summary.
fund summary.
Sorry,
I'll be
Mr.
real quick.
McDermott. Thank you, Todd.
The information you had in your packet in regards to the year-to-date fund summary is through December, and we're tracking still fairly close to our projections that are budgeted with the operating funds budgeted at a $856,000 deficit. Projected numbers as of December are a little more than that, $862,000 deficit. But keep in mind, within that number, there are $140,000 worth of contingencies. So hopefully that number will be reduced at least by $140,000 as we continue on through the year. And as long as some of our state funding continues at 100%, then hopefully we'll end up much better than what is currently projected.
Are there any questions on the year-to-date fund summary for Mr. McDermott? Okay, thank you. Now we'll move ahead. Administrators report, directors reports are included in your packets. Are there any questions from our board members for any of our administrators or directors?
Once again, I want to say thank you. I appreciate, as I texted Dan and let him know today, even the mileage report is information we never used to get. It's nice to have a picture of what all is going on at the bus barn.
Okay. Mr. Cox, superintendent's report.
All right. Well, first, it feels like we're only in our second week of school, but it feels like we've been back much longer than that. We welcomed everybody back last week with teacher institute, our students back in session, and it's been a good start to the semester. Also, for a celebration, I will share a personal celebration that I was able to go get my COVID vaccine today, have my handy dandy COVID sticker. So I didn't get one for voting this year, so I guess it got made up with my COVID sticker. And I know several of our staff members have had the opportunity to get the vaccinations. I believe at the count were 45, 46 staff members and counting just from over the weekend that were able to get vaccinated. And I know several more scheduled this week. So more to come on that, but it's certainly a positive step in the right direction. Something else that I wanted to add that's not in my report that I put in the packet that just changed over the weekend, and again, I'll get into more detail into, is as a result of moving from tier 2 all the way into phase 4 and leapfrogging, if you will, mitigations, that's triggered some changes to what we're able to offer in athletics. We're still sorting through that. There's still information coming out from the IHSA. It doesn't mean, it means something, but it also doesn't mean a great deal. We're not going to be playing games tomorrow or next week, and maybe next month we may be, but certainly not right away. But what we are able to do is start having some contact, some non-contact practices, and some scrimmages and contact practices, depending on the sport and whatever level of risk it's deemed. The low-risk sports will move forward more quickly. We do not currently have any low-risk sports in the wintertime. The sport that would be first up would be volleyball as a medium-risk sport that is currently scheduled to start February 15th. That being said, it could change, and this is for both IHSA and IESA. So Mr. Bedoris is working with our coaches to determine what we can do, what our spacing's like, and we'll have more information out to our teams and our families here in the coming days. So that was a good step forward that was not mentioned in your packet that just occurred over the weekend. A couple other just awareness items for you. We are working in process of scheduling a building committee meeting for potentially the first week of February in order to talk about some of our summer projects and potential projects that need to be completed. Bus bids are out on the street and will be presented to the board in February for approval for 2 school buses, full-size school buses. And then also the calendar. We approve our calendar 2 years at a time. Well, a lot has changed since we approved that calendar last year. In discussions with the REA, we discussed the potential need to look at the calendar and possibly make adjustments, and understand we're going to do that over the course of the next month in order to make recommendations to the board in February. With that being said, depending on what happens this spring and through the summer with the pandemic, we may have to make amendments to that calendar again during the summertime, just like we did this past summer. So we will be working on that. In terms of the vaccinations, we were first able to get employees in 1A. Our nurses were considered 1A, so the vaccine was available to them that first week of January that we were back. We are also able to have our any of our employees, it was primarily teachers and paraprofessionals who work with medically fragile children, were also able to be moved into 1A. That made 26 employees eligible the first week of January, which was a good thing. I know many were able to take advantage of that first dose already. And then in really an unexpected turn of events, in a matter of about 4 days, we went from looking at potentially mid-March to get our first round of vaccines for 1B to we're getting them as we speak. So that was a significant turn of events. We have, as I'd mentioned earlier, 46 people over the weekend received their first dose. We are taking the Moderna vaccine, which means it will be 4 weeks before we get our second. So I will get my second dose on the February board meeting.
Mr. Cox,
yes.
Of the staff that's eligible, what percentage have taken that step to get the vaccine?
That have actually taken it. Well, we were at 46 over the weekend. We're probably somewhere between 55 and 60 at this point. And several, they're filled up already, so people can't get their second round. We typically, the first time we got, or not the second round, but the second wave of people to sign up for their first dose haven't had the opportunity yet. I know several people, when I was visiting a couple buildings today, several people told me they were interested and just hadn't had the opportunity to sign up. We do believe that there will be additional vaccination doses received this week, which would open up another 5,000. Well, it would open up another 2,500 appointments because the 5,000 would be for the first and second dose. We did survey staff before break. This may give you an indicator. Before break, we did a thought exchange with staff, and we had 66% of our people indicated that they would take the vaccine. It was definitely or most likely would take the vaccine. We had 20% of our people who were undecided, and then we had 14% that were not likely to take the vaccine. In going through the questions of individuals who were undecided, you can tell that some of those may very well end up moving into that group that does take the vaccine over time. People who need to talk to their healthcare provider, their primary physician, those type of things. So that's good news. Does that answer the question on?
Yeah, thank you. That was great.
You know, it's going to take time to get everyone vaccinated, even all of our employees vaccinated. That's going to take time. We after your first dose, you know, you build up about 50 some odd percentile. I don't know the exact number, but it's 50 some odd percentile in antibodies. Your second dose, it takes you up into the 93rd or 94th percentile. And then your chances of getting hospitalized after that second dose go down drastically, almost to zero. But it will take time, and especially as we talk about the general public, it will take even more time. But there's promising things happening on that front. In terms of the 10 and 7 day quarantine that I've talked with the board about in the past, the shortened quarantine to 10 days. I'm sorry, I should be 14 and 10 days or 10 and 7 days. The 7 day quarantine is out. Any shortened quarantine for students is not going to be an option. There still is a possibility of a shortened quarantine period for staff members. We're working through that with the health department. They had asked for some data from all the area schools about how many people we had quarantined versus how many people were actually positive. The ability, it doesn't sound like a big difference going from 14 days to 10 days quarantine. But if the numbers held true second semester as it did first, we would get back roughly, and I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was roughly 170 plus work days that we would get back just by shortening that quarantine period down by 4 days. The risk increase is about 1.3% risk increase by shortening that quarantine period down by 4 days. So we're still working with the health department on that. There's some steps they would like us to take and consider before they will make that determination, and ultimately that will be their decision. But it will be a big factor in our ability to staff buildings as we continue to move forward. The COVID-19 testing and pediatric telehealth services were open today for students. So we're just putting that out there so that the board is aware, and that's open to everyone now. Any questions on any of those items before I move forward with transition to in-person instruction with the limited remote?
Mr. Cox, this is Dennis.
Yes, sir.
how many students have encountered or have had COVID that we know of?
As of Friday, it was 71, and that was as of last Friday.
Actually had COVID?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Dan,
Yes.
before we move on, we did have another phone number jump on. It's another area code 618. It ends in 44. We need their name. Whoever called in with that phone number, by law, we have to have a record of everybody who attended the meeting. We need your name, please.
We'll get it recorded and find out. We'll give a call to that person afterwards, maybe, and find out what that is.
Okay.
It's Amanda McElravy.
Thanks, Amanda.
So sorry.
That's all right.
I kind of made myself the hall monitor. I'm sorry.
Do you want me to officially take this into old business?
I still have, I want to go through the transition discussion.
Okay.
And the report.
Okay.
So moving into our transition plans, we're continuing to work collaboratively in planning for increasing time for in-person instruction. In doing so, we're continuing, as we speak, working on risk assessments developed by the CDC for use in schools, and that's being done collaboratively, led by our building principals. The purpose of the risk assessments are to identify the strengths and weaknesses in the mitigations we have in place, to see if there's anything that we can bolster, or to understand where our weak spots are and what we can do about that. This will aid in making adjustments where possible. Our COVID region in central or west central Illinois is Region 3, COVID Region 3, which includes Sangamon County. Our region has the lowest COVID-19 positive rate in the state, and we're currently, as of Friday, we are currently sitting at 6%. The hospital bed availability was on track to fall below 20%, as it was currently sitting at 20.2, which it did drop below that and stayed below that for 3 consecutive days, which was the last piece of data that we needed in order to move into the phase 4 mitigations. We went from last Friday not moving tiers, which I thought we were going to move tiers last Friday, and it did not happen. And it was linked back to that one piece of data. Once that stayed under the 20% for 3 days, it did allow us to not only move tiers, we jumped all the way into phase 4, which when I wrote the report said we were on track of Region 3 being the first region in the state to move to phase 4, and we did, which was to my surprise that it happened this quick. But again, it was a very positive thing that we were able to do that. Other important data that I just want to go through with what we look at to date, and there's never going to be any specific metrics. The CDC, the IDPH, our local health department, our State Board of Education, no one has given schools specific metrics to follow. We've really been on our own trying to determine when and how and where is the appropriate time and the safest way to educate students in person instruction. So what we've done is taken a scaffolded approach. We don't look at one single piece of data. We try to look at multiple pieces of data and layer that over the top of each other to build a risk assessment, if you will. So Region 3 metrics that we look at are the test positivity rate, as I mentioned, was at 6%, and all the data I'm going through with you was as of Friday. That's a moderate risk, and it's the target rate for our area. New cases per 100,000 is 265 cases per 100,000, which is a substantial increase or at warning level. Our new cases, our total new cases were 518 at minimal. Youth cases were at 104 at substantial. Deaths were at 11 at target. Adult ER COVID visits was at 3.2%. Target COVID hospital admissions was at 22 or target. And ICU bed availability was at 20.2 or target. The core indicators we look at to inform in-person learning are number 1 and 2, new cases and test positivity. So according to the CDC, if you look at our region's new cases, it's at 0.05%. which rates as the lowest risk for transmission in schools. The next is test positivity, which is 6%, which translates to moderate risk for transmission in schools. And then the third piece of the core indicators we look at for the CDC is the district's ability to implement 5 key mitigation strategies that are listed below. And those strategies are the consistent and correct use of face masks, social distancing to the greatest extent possible, hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette, cleaning and disinfection, contact tracing in collaboration with the local health department. Our district's able to meet all 5 strategies correctly, but inconsistency resulting in a lower risk of transmission in schools. Now, I want to note, especially on the inconsistency piece, the biggest piece that's inconsistent on that for us now and in the future as we move forward is that of social distancing at the 6 feet, to the greatest extent possible. As we add students, the ability to social distance will become more difficult, which could move our risk factor from lower to moderate in those key indicators. A couple pieces that I do want to discuss on the distancing piece. For the CDC and IDPH and our local health department and the State Board of Education, we're to attempt to social distance to the greatest extent possible. But it's one of the 5 mitigating factors, not the only factor. It's when feasible and when possible. Even today in the hybrid model, while we do our best, we still aren't able to social distance all the time. Otherwise, when we contact trace, we do not have to quarantine individuals. Now, the data that we give and put out will tell part of the story, but doesn't necessarily tell the whole, because one student may be positive, but it doesn't necessarily translate that 17 were quarantined, because we also have students who are being quarantined as a result of what happens outside of school with family members and events outside of school. At other times, it might depend on the age level. If you have a positive case that happens in a pre-K or a kindergarten class, there's absolutely no way you can social distance the pre-K and kindergarten students. They're on top of each other, so we're more likely to quarantine that entire class out of an abundance of caution. The third layer that we look at, in addition to the 5 mitigating factors and the data for the CDC and our area region data, is our in-school metrics, which is to us one of the most important pieces of data. As of Friday, our current COVID positive staff was 2, which is determined stable. Our year total of COVID positive staff is 17 as of Friday. Current COVID staff quarantined was 10, which was stable. Our year total of staff quarantined is 134. Our current positive students as of last week was 3, which was decreasing or stable. Our year total COVID positive students was 71. Current students in quarantine were 66. And then the year total of students who were quarantined is 1,236. The one piece of data that's difficult for us to dissect is staff and students who are quarantined, as I'd mentioned earlier. In that data, some of those individuals are quarantined more than once. We have both students and staff who have ended up having to be quarantined for various reasons on more than one occasion.
No, it's just to follow up on that. Do those numbers include students who had elected to be full remote?
Not always. There are times they would, more likely not, because one, we depend on them to report to us, or if they're involved in an activity, then we would know. So there are instances we don't know. The other instances we don't know is over break. I believe over break, we asked individuals to report to us for contact tracing purposes if there was any COVID positives in students. I think we received 3 to 5, and I don't think we received 5. Well, it's probably reasonable to assume that there was more cases than that over that 2-week period. So we only know what gets reported to us if it's not occurring here at school.
Right. I just think the numbers are higher than we recognize. Not to say that they're bad, but they're just higher than.
Yes, most definitely, potentially. They are. And what we look at is the likelihood of in-school transmission and what that looks like in school with that. So to date, we don't have, it's difficult for us to link COVID cases directly, COVID transmission directly to school. Some of our cases, we know definitively where they come from. And in the majority, it's safe to assume the majority of those do happen outside of school. We have minimal that happen within school. But to say that zero has happened in school, it's likely that there have been COVID cases happen in school. But if you look at our local, state, and national data, the transmission in school is low enough to the point that the CDC, IDPH, and our local health department are recommending that we do continue to work to move toward in-person instruction. After the planning and collaboration, I'm prepared to recommend that the district, our district schools transition to our 40-day per week in-person instruction on Tuesday, February 16th. And I can't stress this great enough, with the understanding that this timeline could be pushed back as conditions warrant. I'll take a step backwards. Our original target to attempt to do 4-day per week in-person instruction, as we worked with and collaborated with our teachers, was that space between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Our initial discussions in October, or discussions we had in October, was our date is good. This was before we hit Halloween. We're like, hey, everything's going really well. And it's a natural place. There's a 3-week period between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Let's give it a go. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, we have 2 weeks to step back and reassess. We never got to that point because of the spike that happened at the end of October and leading up to Thanksgiving. So we had to continue to push back. Our next target, as you know, right before Christmas, was February 2nd. We have already tonight recommended moving that target date back to February 16th. And the sole purpose of that is so we can get as many people as possible with both doses of their vaccine, or at least their first dose of vaccine. If we continue to trend the direction we're trending, both in our region, in our COVID region 3, but also in Sangamon County in our school district, it's reasonable to assume we could hit that target date. But as we know, one day, 1 week can change our data quite drastically. So we will keep an eye on that. I hit all of that, so let me skip. With safety and instructional considerations in mind, combined with lessons learned from the past in the first semester, when we do move forward with that 4-day per week plan, we need some significant adjustments, and we've been working collaboratively to make adjustments to our 4-day per week plan, both for instructional purposes and safety purposes combined. And those adjustments are, on Monday, we would still continue to have remote instruction for all on Monday, and that would be remote instruction, planning, and professional learning for our staff. On Tuesday through Friday, the junior high school and high school would be in-person instruction from the start of the school day to 12:30 the afternoon. So there would be 4 30-minute blocks of in-person classes, and there would be 4 30-minute blocks of remote classes. One question that I've heard that has come up, those remote classes are for our remote students. So a in-person student would not have to be here until 12:30, go home, and then get on a remote class in the afternoon. Part of the reason for that is twofold. We still have a very high number of remote-only students at our high school. The other piece is transmission is greater among our older students. And then just from an instructional standpoint, to be able to get that instruction in with a high number of remote students. At the elementary and intermediate schools, students would have the opportunity to attend Tuesday through Friday from the start of the day till approximately 1:45 to 2 p.m. We'll have to stagger for buses and bus release there, and that would give the opportunity for some remote instruction at the end of the day. Our transmission rates are much, much lower with elementary age children. We also have a much lower rate of remote learners at the elementary level. Students with special needs or any students who are at risk who are already attending 4 days per week for full day would continue to do so. I mean, we would continue to work to see how and when we could build up to that. To be clear, we do have a good population of students right now who are going 4 days per week for full school days, from pre-K all the way up into high school, with mostly, by and large, students who are at risk or who have special needs. These revisions that I just told you represent a significant change. So at the beginning of the year, the board approved a resolution that called for the superintendent to be able to move forward or backward into our instructional learning plans as conditions warrant. We have done so, but we have done so in a collaborative way where I've given presentations like this to the board. We've had discussions and heard it all out. And each time we've either moved forward or we've held steady and stayed the course. But in this particular instance, we're making a significant change from that original plan of the 4 day per week instruction. So when we get into old business, I would recommend that the board approve that change to that instruction plan. And again, we may implement that plan on February 16th, or we may have to push that target date back. Between now and February 16th, if we have to hold, that's going to result in communication with myself and Dr. Magulius, and then vis-a-vis report to the rest of the board about what we're doing and why we may need to, for the lack of a better phrase, pump the brakes. If things do take a turn, or we have a data spike that's not good, and signifies that there could be a greater risk for in-person transmission in school. In terms of our elective remote students to be able to return to in-person instruction, just to reiterate this with the board, we allowed students who are full elective remote learners to come back at the beginning of the semester, but unlike the second semester, we're allowing students to return quicker. So students can now come back at the third quarter midterm, at the beginning of the fourth quarter midterm, or any time there is a significant change made to the instructional plan. So for example, should we announce tomorrow that we are going to move forward in February with that 4 day week per plan, administrators are going to be reaching out, principals are going to be reaching out to their student body, determining how many students would return that are currently on remote, and vice versa. They may learn some students who choose to go to the full elective remote model. I mean, it's reasonable to assume we will have people move both directions as a result of that decision. And I'll pause there for any questions or further discussion.
Well, I guess I have a couple of questions. I know that you're.
Hold on just a second, Amy. Move into old business.
No, it's fine.
Okay, go ahead, Amy.
Okay. I know that you are meeting weekly with the staff and that there is a collaborative nature in all of these changes and recommendations that are coming. Are the nurses part of those weekly conversations? Because a 4 day change will certainly impact them as well. And
no,
are they on board with this?
No, I had a conversation. I've been meeting with Heather Arnold regularly. We talk almost daily. We met last Friday, and some concerns were made aware that they have, and we're planning on meeting again this week.
Okay. And then the other question, or maybe it's just a comment, is that I'm sure when we go from a hybrid to a 4 day, it requires significant changes to teacher schedules and teacher plans because of the amount of time they will have students. Again, the 8:30 to 12:30 at the high school, and then the 4 blocks. I have to assume there's a considerable concern that if numbers change and we revert back, that it's constantly, that their schedule is constantly in turmoil. I'm hoping that over the next 4 to 5 weeks before we reach the February 16th target date, that numbers will stabilize and it will be a clear indication that a move to 4 days is a move that would be able to stay there, and it wouldn't be something that we move into only to upend everything again and revert us back to this hybrid. And that's just kind of more of a statement, I guess, than a question.
I would concur with that statement 100%. I think in some of my recent meetings prior to us having the vaccine available, the comment I made is we don't want to open just 3 weeks later to pull backwards, though there's never a guarantee. So it's just how reasonably safe do you assume? And I know the having vaccines available is not the panacea. It's not the magic pill that's going to fix everything, but it does allow us to take a significant step forward. The greatest challenge that we still face to this is the ability to staff our buildings. And as we move forward and have more people vaccinated, that gives us the better opportunity to keep our buildings staffed. That will be what shuts us down.
Mr. Cox, I had a quick question. I think it was in the materials, but I forget the number. At the high school, I know there are more people that are full-time remote. What percentage of the total high school students are full-time remote? And how does that factor into the 4-day-a-week plan and the spacing and all of that?
Sure. Mr. Ashbaugh, how many approximately do you have on full remote right now?
306.
Out of?
That was out of 743.
So then the other factor is you have 306, but then it also depends on how many students are on quarantine as well, which at any given time can raise that number quite significantly.
So that's almost half.
Yes. Yeah. You can get to half with quarantines.
Right.
And a lot of the people who are remote are not remote due to concerns about health issues. They're remote because they found that it's a better situation than trying to be here in person. They're getting more out of their education online and finding that they're more efficient online than they are in person. And so it remains to be seen, are we going to be more efficient or less efficient when we're doing 4 days with still a new system? And I'm curious to see what those numbers are going to do. Are you going to get some of the kids are going to come back because they like being in persons, doing it this way, but didn't like the 2 days on, 2 days off? Or the other piece of this is I'm less concerned about some of these older kids and the health concerns for them because they're not social distancing outside of school. They're just not.
Right.
There's a few of them who are. Definitely, I know that there's some that are, but there's a whole lot of them that are not.
One of the advantages, and you raise some really good points and questions. One of the advantages that we discussed at the high school level, and hindsight's always 20/20. If we could go back, we might have designed it different, but we just didn't think about it at the time. Is in our current hybrid model, a student only sees their teacher once per week. So going 4 days, because we still maintain the block. So now they're going to at least be able to see their teacher 2 days per week, which is more of that face-to-face to be able to, because there's just certain things, and it comes from course to course too. Some courses are more conducive for online instruction than others. Our high school teachers have done a phenomenal job of using the Mondays to get kids in for lab classes or for extra help and supports. And I know they've done a lot of extra things there to help their students out. And we're to this point where, we talk about any given age of kids, but we're trying to balance this health safety and also with the social emotional well-being and the student learning. And one of my greatest concerns outside of the social emotional well-being of our students is the learning of our early learners. K1, 2, the students who need to read, and we know if they're not reading by first grade, by the end of first grade, their chance of success through school drops dramatically, like 80% dramatically. And those students need to be in person with their teacher because that's how you're going to teach them to read.
Amen.
Dan?
Yes, Mr. File.
For a Capillary Career Center student, how will this affect them?
They'll still follow the CACC schedule.
So they'll go to school in the afternoon out there as you.
Yes. Yep. They'll follow how CACC, if CACC is in person or if they're remote or it depends on the class, they'll still follow that schedule per the norm. Same with our College Now, which I believe right now it's all remote for College Now.
Okay, I saw them too. So good. Thank you.
So before we move into new business, or I'm sorry, old business, I think what we're looking for, what our administrative team is looking for, and myself is, you know, the consensus. Do we have the direction and the support to move forward, knowing that we may have to pause for our 4-day-a-week instruction mid-February? Do we have that consensus to be able to give that an attempt?
I would just add, I'd like to see us start February 2nd, but I can definitely vote for the 16th. But I'd rather see February 2nd if we could start then.
And the vote, I'll just remind you to keep that muted. Thank you. And the vote that we are working on tonight, what we're looking at, and I clarified this with Mr. Cox earlier today, is that we are truly talking about and providing a motion to look at the structure of instruction and the transition plan that we had approved back in August. It's changed. We know now what we didn't know then, and there are pieces of that that are changing. So what we're voting on now is not necessarily a start date, but the next plan, the next phase, and what that will be, and the changes from that plan in August to what he's described it would be now. And as he said, the hopes that he had, and I'll say you were a lot more hopeful than I was back in the end of October when he was talking about the possibility of getting students back 4 days a week between Thanksgiving and Christmas. You know, that had to get pushed back. It's what the metrics told us, and he's watching those very carefully. So it may happen again, but we need to have our plan approved so that we're ready when metrics are ready, when our district is ready, when our administrators are ready to move forward.
I'm very comfortable with the plan. I feel like Dan really does his homework. He does a great job of sharing with us and the public all the thought he puts into it, all the metrics that go into it. And as some of you know, I found out today that I'm what they call a long hauler. I get serious COVID is. I'm going to be dealing with it for months, personally. So I'm not downplaying at all, but I think because of the importance of in-person education, we have to try this. And if there's families that are concerned and worried, they have a choice. They still have the choice to keep their kids at home. But the families that really want their kids to be in school don't have this choice if you don't give it to them. And I know we're not voting on dates, but I'm comfortable with the things that have been proposed. I understand we need to let everybody get their vaccine at least started before we go back. I think that's prudent. And I want to point out, and I don't need to put a pot shot at any other districts at all with this. There were districts that went back to the beginning of January, which I personally think is probably a little crazy because you didn't let a lot of space go between when families vacationed and were probably more exposed and then came back to school. We're obviously allowing a lot of time for that as well.
My biggest concern regarding social distancing, which you know, and you remind me to the greatest extent possible. I'm most concerned with the 4, 5, 6 classrooms. So whatever we can continue to do to support, to think, to brainstorm, to find solutions, to, you know, keep looking at that would make me even more comfortable.
To that point, Dr. Magoulias, this afternoon, looking through the CDC website, because they released a ton of new tools. And at our one of our most recent administrator meetings, I believe it was Mrs. Carey who asked about, hey, what's the best way to set up a classroom? Like, can students face each other? Should they all face the same direction? They've actually, in response to knowing that schools are not able to social distance and have in-person instruction, period, whether it's hybrid or full, they released a document with a checklist of recommended ways to set up your classroom. So in this particular instance, like in some of our classrooms at risk, we have tables. Well, it would be keep all of your students at the same table, cohorted, don't let them move. Same thing with your classrooms that are desks, that you're trying to keep students and not move them, not switch seats, all of that, and keep people cohorted, because then that reduces the number of individuals that are quarantined. The quarantine is what's causing us the most significant challenges, and I'm not here to debate whether we should or shouldn't be quarantining, but the reality is it's causing a great deal of frustration whenever, you know, a child, all around, for the teacher, for the principal, for the parent, for the child, when they have to get quarantined, it causes a great deal of frustration. But likewise, we also have people who are choosing remote instruction more so to avoid the quarantine, not necessarily for health safety reasons. And again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing nor a good thing. It just is what it is. So the quarantines are really, really challenging. And it also makes it challenging to staff our buildings. We've had, I forget the data, but we've had hundreds and hundreds of quarantine days from staff, and we've had less than 20 staff members positive. That makes it incredibly difficult. That's why we're fighting so hard for that shortened quarantine period, just to get some of those work days back. One, to staff our buildings, but two, not to have repeated changes within a classroom.
Are we going to require teachers who've been vaccinated or teachers who've previously tested positive to quarantine after they've been vaccinated if they've been exposed?
I don't know the answer to that. That's something we're researching to find out, because I've not seen a definitive if you've had the vaccination. I know if you've already had COVID, you still have to quarantine. But there is a period where you don't.
And there's discussions right now going on about whether they're going to change that. So back to your biggest concern, because I want to throw this out also. My biggest concern is the 66% of the staff that said that they want to be vaccinated that may not have an opportunity to be vaccinated. If they haven't been vaccinated because they wouldn't rearrange their schedule, or they wouldn't do whatever it was they needed to do, that's on them. But if they wanted to be vaccinated, couldn't be vaccinated, we've got that date coming around, and now they've got more kids in the class, and we may end up with more kids, or we may not. It may be that we have just as many who said, you know what, the heck with it, I'm going to stay full remote. But if all of a sudden there's more people in their class, I want to figure out a way to make an accommodation. I don't think it's going to be very many teachers. But if there are teachers that are on that list that wanted to be vaccinated, can't be vaccinated, I want to figure out a way that those teachers can feel safe, because there's already a tremendous amount of stress on them.
Absolutely.
There's stress between the buildings because of feelings, true or not, of inequitable work balance. There's concerns all across the board about the pressures that have been put on them. I don't want to add that fear.
Yeah,
and so
that vaccine is a game changer.
So let's find identify who those staff members are going to be, and figure out where they can be until they can have that second shot. If they don't want the shot, that's on them. If they want it and can't get it, we have an obligation to them.
So here's our plan to that end. That's a huge reason why we moved from February 2nd to the 16th. That's before we knew what vaccine we were getting. With the Pfizer vaccine, it's a 3-week period. With the Moderna, which we're all getting, it's a 28 to 30-day period in between. So individuals that are getting vaccinated this week will have their second dose that week of February 16th. Many on Monday, Tuesday, but there'll be others throughout that week.
Well, and I'm sure you can send something out either through the district leadership or through the buildings that if they in that narrow band of wanted it, couldn't get it in time.
Yes.
They need to be able to know that they can reach out to you, and we'll figure out a solution for the.
We anticipate more appointments opening up as early as this week, which will be good. And then our plan is anyone who's not able to get signed up on this next wave, if you will, I'm going to ask Carrie Seaton to send an email to our staff to say, is there anybody out there who wanted to get vaccinated but could not get in for one of the first 2 appointment opportunities?
I know that the Department of Public Health and the hospital had trouble using up their vaccines. They couldn't get people to sign up.
Yes.
So
And so when we do that, we're going to push to try to get those individuals vaccinated or provide them assistance however we can. Right now, it's kind of we get a notice, we send an email out to staff, and then there's a portal, and you got to be on it because that thing fills up fast.
Yeah. And my concern with yours, Todd, that doesn't resolve my concern, but it's a big piece of it. The vaccine for the teachers who choose to and want to get the vaccine is important that they have that opportunity. And I'm still concerned about the space, especially in the smaller classrooms and the number of students that are in there. So you answered some things to that, and I know we're still looking at that about how to manage more students in a smaller classroom and keep them as safe as possible, or to use extra space or extra humans if we have.
There's ways we can mitigate that risk. We just can't eliminate it.
I know.
I wanted to make a few comments if I could. I think the comments that both made are great about the vaccine. I think it's incredibly hopeful. I was in touch with a local hospital today about the vaccine. I think the health department is working hard, but the distribution is a huge challenge. And I think whatever you do to continue to educate the teachers about the value of the vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, and the studies are just so incredibly hopeful about, they've had 0 serious cases during their trials of those that have taken it. So, and very few got COVID after taking it. So that, and I know the local hospitals have even put out videos to their staff that, we can share with the teachers. But I think it's just really important to highlight for people, continue to educate the teachers and staff about how great it is. And I appreciate we've done a great job of getting the teachers kind of in line, and hopefully there'll be more vaccine. I too am concerned about, I think there are no good choices. I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I think you've done an incredible job. The teachers and administrators have done an excellent job of thinking through all the options. I think from my perspective, the comment about giving parents choice, the kids can be at home, or if the kids want to be home, giving them a good option to learn there, or to come in 2 days now or 4 days later. I think that's, having that choice is important to me. So I think I'm supportive of the plan because of that choice that you're giving to parents, although there are no perfect choices. And I think everyone knows that. My one concern, like has been shared, is the distance, and if there's any way, and part of the question was even at the high school, if half the schools there is their opportunity to kind of give some of those younger grades more room with the facility. But I think the spacing is an issue for student safety, but also just the quarantine issue, the disruption of going out and in, I think will be a challenge. And I know you've thought about that, but that's my one concern as you move to a 4-day work week. So I appreciate all the great thought that's gone in from all the teachers and the staff.
To reiterate something we all know, it's like never been so more true than this decision. No matter what we do, we're going to be wrong in a large group size. And we have been given all kinds of information, and all we can do is go forward with the information we've given and make a decision that we in our hearts think is the best one and run with it.
Okay.
I would also hope to see, I know that there was discussion that a survey would be sent out just to see what the numbers are, especially in the high school where so many are remote, how many would be coming back, because that would answer not all of the distancing concerns, but it would give some indication of what the capacity and what the numbers in the rooms would be.
Tomorrow, principals would be, depending the discussions this evening, principals are planning on reaching out to student body tomorrow to find out that, because that too is important for a host of reasons, the ones you raised, plus some other logistical things from transportation to lunches and other things.
Okay. I think we're ready to move on to old business. Agreed?
Mhm.
All right. So we have discussion and possible action to amend in-person instruction with limited remote learning plan. Mr. Cox, we've gone over a lot of this. Will you repeat or reiterate what we need to know as we move into a possible motion?
This, just very brief, we go from, this amends the original plan from 4 days a week, bell to bell, 8 to 3:20, to at the junior senior high, it will be 4 days per week from the start of the day till 12:30. The afternoon would be 4 30-minute blocks. And then in the intermediate and elementary schools, it would be from the beginning of the school day till 1:45 to 2 o'clock for that staggered dismissal.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the amendment to in-person instruction with limited remote learning plan?
I'll make that.
Thank
I'll
you,
second.
Mr. Goebel. Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. Okay, call the roll, please.
Mr. Carly,
Yes.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Dr. Magulius,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Yatoni,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson.
Yes.
Okay. That is the only new business, old business that we have. Okay. All right, new business, Board of Education Committee updates. The Personnel Committee, Mr. Cox, and then a representative from the Personnel Committee, please provide an update from the meeting.
Just in brief, the beginning part of the meeting, I presented to the committee our what we would call our evidence-based funding gap analysis. This isn't necessarily a report that's intended to be a definitive report. It's more of a guide document. It's not something we post publicly because it's just a guide based on variables that helps us determine what our staffing levels are. So what we do is enter in the unique characteristics of our district, from enrollment to our poverty count to our ELL, English language learner count. And then we look at our adequacy target and all of for evidence-based funding. And then we look at the 27 elements and what the research says is the ideal or the best practice in terms of the research and how it looks in your school. And then it just helps us generate conversations about where we can spend our limited dollars and resources. It's not intended to say, let's get all 27 elements to the exact level of what the research says, because it's not possible. It would take us roughly $8 or $9 million more dollars of revenue to get to that point. So it's more about, hey, if you have X amount of new dollars coming in, where do you want to invest those dollars in relationship to the research? We take that document and don't look at it in isolation. We take that document and look at it with our budget projections, and we look at it with our student achievement data. Those three things scaffold together is what helps us make personnel determinations. So I just wanted that personnel committee to see that and know that that's what goes on in the background of how we make part of our decisions in terms of staffing as we move forward into the future.
I'll report on the other side of the Personnel Committee. We also started our work and discussion on writing the superintendent evaluation. All right, the first reading of Rochester Board Policy Manual Customization. The updated and customized board policy manuals included within the packet for first reading and review. Are there any questions? Okay, we will move on. Approval of resolution to regulate expense reimbursements. Any questions?
I just want to touch on this briefly. This is something that is required by law. I think it first came into place maybe 2 years ago. It was something that got lost in the shuffle in transitions from superintendent to interims to superintendent. It's essentially, the sole purpose of it is it doesn't cause us to do anything different than what we're currently doing. It just means the board needs to hit a target of what's the maximum as a district that we would reimburse all individuals associated with the district in business related expenses whether it's travel, whether it's reimbursement for supplies and whatnot. So we set that maximum level, and if we went above that maximum level, it would have to be approved by the board. And then the other one is to set a maximum limit of reimbursement for Board of Education members for any type of travel related expenses and staff. So we just use the index, the Chicago index, to set some of our prices, and we look at what we currently spent and then set a number there. So at any point in time, would we go above that, the board would have to take action and review those reimbursements to why. Really for us, this is a process of compliance because we just don't really have many reimbursement related expenses in our district. It just doesn't happen very often. Anything you'd like to add, Mr. McDermott?
No, that's pretty much right on target.
This would be something I would add to the consent agenda in the future. We do need to approve it annually and would bring it down for discussion unless there was a significant change, but I don't anticipate that there would be.
Okay. There are no questions. I'll need a motion to approve the resolution to regulate expense reimbursements as presented.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Call the roll.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Dr. Magulius,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Yatoni,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
and Mr. Carly.
Yes.
Okay, approval of fuel bids.
All right, with the fuel bids this year, normally we have always bid fuel right before the start of the school year. We have changed that practice to bid that during the winter months because prices are usually better. This contract going forward is going to be for a fixed rate contract beginning July 1st through next school year, so fiscal year 22. We had just one bid this year come in from our current provider, Prairie Land FS. And again, the contract term will be July 1st, 21 through June 30th of 22. For gasoline, it would be a fixed price of $2.30. For diesel, it would be $2.22. And based upon our estimated usage during a normal school year, we use about 9,000 gallons of gasoline, 40,000 gallons of diesel fuel, which comes in at those prices at just under $110,000 estimated. And for those of you that haven't been around, the history of our total fuel cost back in FY17 was a little over $105,000 for the year. FY18, just under 108,000. FY19, just under 134,000. And last year we spent 95,000, but obviously the buses stopped running in March, so that's why that number is so low. So our recommendation obviously is to accept the Prairie Land FS bid for the next school year.
Their service has been good. No problems.
No problem.
Any other questions?
No, just a comment, Bob. In years past, you would get bids for fixed rate and variable rates, and I don't remember exactly why we went away from that, but I think it was just simply more certainty in our budgets, your budgets. Sometimes the other providers might prefer the variable rate, so that takes some of their risk away. And they charge a higher rate when it's a fixed rate, but that was something that we would rather pay so that we'd have the certainty within our budget. And I don't know if that, passing that on to some of the new board members.
Yeah, no, probably, well, since I would say roughly FY15, we've always gone with the fixed rate. Yes, we have bid the variable rates as well, but prior to FY15, when we went to the fixed rate concept, we do end up saving money just because that cost is always constant compared to when it was variable. Then it's whatever prices are doing at the time. So there was a lot of fluctuation in that variable rate. And that's why we ended up going to the fixed rate concept for fuel.
And it's worked well.
I assume they have the ability to hedge those rates so they can give us a more competitive price than we would be able to get. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the fuel bids as presented.
So moved.
Take that as a motion and a second. Thank you. Okay, call the roll, please.
Dr. Magulius,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Yatoni,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Carley,
Yes.
Mr. File.
Yes.
Next, we have the approval of the senior band trip.
Two things I'd like to address at the beginning of this. Number one, our band trip that was scheduled to Disney World for this year for the total band has been canceled. And talking with our fine arts department, who's worked with the travel agency plus Disney, there's no way to pull off that entire trip. So what their request to do is, instead of waiting another 4 years, is to attempt to do that trip next spring, in the spring of 22. Since that trip has already been approved, I don't believe we need to approve it again, but if we do, let me know and we'll get it on a future agenda. So give that some thought. With the next piece, in talking with the fine arts department, they would like to attempt, since we canceled this trip, they would like to attempt and at least try to have a senior band trip this summer. They do understand that it may not happen, but we can't make that decision as far as doing it last minute. We have to plan now and have the ability to cancel. What they're proposing, and I may be off a day here, but it's a 4-day, 3-night trip that would go between Cincinnati and Cleveland. Thank you. Cincinnati and Cleveland would be the two trips, 4 days, 3 nights. They're working through the various safety and health considerations. They're working with the travel agency along within the guidelines that we must follow. We also have insurance that would allow us to cancel all the way up to the day of the trip. So I would recommend, and obviously there's some questions that Mr. Ashbar and myself can help answer. I would recommend that we go ahead and approve the trip. Let them have the opportunity to try, again, with the understanding that we may have to cancel the trip. Unfortunately, if we had to make the decision today, that answer would be no, but a lot can change between now and June.
I hope it does. And this is mostly because the senior group is the only group then that will not, the only grade level of band members who will not have the opportunity to attend the last Disney trip or the next Disney trip, if it's
correct.
Yeah.
This is just an opportunity to try to do something for the seniors. I believe it's approximately 54 students.
Are there music Hall of Fames in Cincinnati and Cleveland? I'm unaware, but I assume
Rock
that's
and Roll
what,
Hall of Fame. Yeah.
Rock and Roll Hall of
On
Fame.
their trip agenda, yes.
Nice. Okay.
I have one question. I noticed in the write-up that they said they hope to take Heather along. Do we know if Heather's willing and planning to go?
They're in conversation about that, but I don't know that for certain.
Okay.
I think she's always gone in the past.
Well, she has. Yeah, because I was on the last one.
That'll whether Heather can go or not, it will certainly be a consideration, because the thing we're working through, we have to figure out what do we do with a student if that student would contract COVID while on the trip. That's going to be the big factor, because that's, no matter what, that's going to be a consideration we have to take.
Well, I really appreciate that the music department is trying to do something special for the seniors, and I'm definitely a proponent, but I would strongly prefer that if we could get a nurse, you know, considering the circumstances in the world today, I think that would make it a better thing.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Is there a motion to approve this senior band trip as presented?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Call the roll.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Utoni,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Carly,
Yes.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Dr. Magulius.
Yes. Okay, we'll move on to miscellaneous before we head into closed session. Are there any items for miscellaneous? Crickets tonight. Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees. Thank you. Second? Okay, call the roll,
Second.
please.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Utoni,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Carly,
Yes.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Dr. Magulius.
Yes. Thank you. All right. So Mrs. Reynolds made a motion to approve the personnel report. Is there a second?
So moved.
Thank you. Call the roll.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Carly,
Yes.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Dr. Magulius,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Utoni.
Yes.
Okay. All we need to do now is adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll do that one too.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned.